Welcome to the Thriving Artist Podcast, an educational feature of the Clark Healings Fund for Visual Artists. The Clark Healings Fund exists to provide business training and entrepreneurial learning to visual artists to turn working artists into thriving artists. Thanks to Jerry's Artorama for supporting CHF in this episode of the Thriving Artist Podcast. Jerry's passion is to serve artists. Jerry specializes in supplies and framing, and you can find them at 17 retail locations across the country or online at jerrysartorama.com. Now, we have 4 guests today on the show, and this is an unusual show because you can see our guests for the first time. Most of our shows are audio only. So forgive me if you're listening on an audio podcast platform, Spotify, iTunes, whatever, that's fine. But be aware there is a video version of this show available on our website. You'll be able to go there at clarkhealingsfund.org and watch that if you really want the extra context. Now, the 4 guests start with Kim Pion, who is Executive Director of Southwestern Association for Indian Arts, Swaya for short. Elizabeth Hewlings, the Executive Director of the Clark Healings Fund. Of course, we're the ones bringing you this podcast, and you've met Elizabeth before if you're a frequent listener. Eric Spar, Founder and Director of ArtsFand, a website ecosystem that provides a homepage, portfolio, and e-commerce, and a shared marketplace for working artists. And Steve Pernot, who is leading the Vercadia implementation project for Swaya. Vercadia is a 3D immersive virtual reality environment for the 21st century. And of course, I'm Daniel Degree, your host, founder of MadPipe and co-founder of Free Agent Source, which are also partners in the endeavor we'll be discussing today. Welcome to the show, all 4 of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I'm going to give you all a quick briefing on the topic of this episode, you all meaning the audience, so that you kind of understand what we're going to be rapping about today. The organizations of everyone here are working together on a groundbreaking project having transformed the most prestigious and longest running market for Native American artists, the Santa Fe Indian Market, into a complete virtual experience beginning this year. Now, it went live on August 1st, and the work of hundreds of artists is now featured on websites hosted by ArtsFand, for which we have Eric Spar here today. And additionally, those artists are receiving art business education from CHF's digital campus. For the broad audience, long-term art collectors and supporters of the market, it's an amazing atmosphere of delight and awe at a time when most of us are cooped up in our own worlds of social distance. Virtual attendees and Swaya members experience a virtual reality construct created by the cutting-edge developer group Vercadia. And together, these leaders and dozens of other sponsors, collaborators, and business partners are broadcasting multiple live-streamed events, including the annual fashion show, awards ceremony gala, and Swaya benefit auction. And the Indian Market 2020, the virtual edition, is a precedent-setting collaboration that is championing the livelihoods of Native American artists and continuing even now a 99-year-old tradition. So stay tuned at the end of this episode. We'll give you several links you won't want to miss. Maybe grab a pencil now. And in the meantime, I want to ask a question of Elizabeth and Kim. So Elizabeth Hewlings and Kim Pion, this is not just about virtualizing the market per se, but about collaboration between arts organizations, artists, collectors, and sponsors, and really all the sectors of the art industry. But it began as a shared vision between the 2 of you. So could one of you briefly tell the story of why and how the Swaya CHF collaboration came about?
So I think this was a scenario where Swaya was needing to find a way to pivot after they had canceled their Indian market due to the pandemic. And I actually came on board after the organization had spoken with Clark Healings Fund on that possibility. And so once I became the executive director of the organization and really vetted that quickly with regards to my board and staff and Clark Healings team as well, it just seemed like it was a great partnership for us to collaborate together and move this vision forward. It was a concept at the time, and now we're really in a place of vision. And so it's been a great partnership, and I'm really excited to be part of this collaboration.
I think it was sort of kismet. I had actually been talking with some people at Swaya going back to January or even end of last year about how to pivot, how to grow, how to expand beyond, 1 week in person in August in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And then so many things happened all at the same time. COVID happened. Kim came on board, and we really had a meeting of the minds from the get-go. And we're just thrilled to be doing this. I mean, it's very, as Daniel said in the opening, it's very exciting to be able at this moment to do something that is empowering and beautiful and supports economically and artistically a group of people who usually get short shrift. And we're getting to put them center stage and having a lot of fun doing it with everybody on this call.
Elizabeth, can you follow up those ideas and tell us what does each party bring to the table for the project and for the artists between you and between CHF and Swaya?
Just the two of us? Sure. Well, I mean, Swaya has been a champion for Native arts for 100 years. I mean, it's coming up on their anniversary. And CHF is interested in promoting artists' ability to earn a living and therefore get their art to market so that the market can decide what it likes and what it wants to buy. We want to level the playing field and get as much out there as possible and let everybody have a fair shot. And so it's a beautiful combination here where we have an organization whose goal is to do that for Native arts, and an organization that is coming from the artist perspective to drive that forward. Instead of top down, it's really a bottom up proposition.
So it sounds like a particular application of what we're doing over at the Clark Healings Fund, meeting the actual brain trust of the Clark Healings Fund. Kim, when you took the director role at Swaya in the spring, did you think that the market would be canceled completely given everything that's happening, or were you anticipating that this summer would look different at all?
I think that there was initially, because that was in mid-April when I actually accepted the position, and within 2 weeks of that initial baptism by fire, it was a scenario where I think we were hopeful that this pandemic would have passed, and even was there going to be an opportunity to maybe do some of it virtual and some of it in person. But as we moved forward, even by the end of May, it was a scenario where we were full on, and if there was going to be an opportunity, what would that look like? And now that we're here, of course, it's not been anything but intense. I think just working out of our homes and trying to develop a virtual Indian market that's what does that look like, right? What is the show? What is the market? What is all of those pieces? And so I think by the time we were into this, by the end of May, it was more of let's just focus on a full-on virtual Indian market.
So I have a couple more questions for you and Elizabeth, and then I want to pivot and pull in Eric and then Steve. So let me ask you what I consider a bit of a hot topic. What's it like, and maybe this is for you, Elizabeth, what's it like to offer this kind of strategic, big picture thinking to the arts community of, yes, you've done this in person. Yes, it's been analog up to now. Yes, you've focused on certain values being the driving values, face-to-face interaction, et cetera. But now we're pivoting. Is the arts community ready for this, or has it been an amazing shock?
Well, really, nobody was ready for this, right? Except maybe us, because this is what we've already been trying to do. But what I found is, first of all, I mean, I do business strategy for a living. This is where I come from. This is the team that we've built. So it's exciting for me to be able to plug in at that level, at more the organizational, strategic level, and have those kinds of conversations with people and figure out how to bring more holistic, bigger solutions. And in this moment, what I find is everybody, it's just push has come to shove, you know, something's got to give. They absolutely cannot deliver on their mission doing their programming business as usual because they're not allowed to do business as usual. So everybody has, as a result, grudgingly sometimes, excitedly other times, become more receptive to the idea that they have to pivot and they have to join the 21st century and move forward. And we recognize that at the other end of COVID, people are going to want to reintegrate. They're going to say, well, let's meet in person again. Let's do things again. But, the genie's out of the bottle. We're not going to go backwards. So I look forward to continuing to help organizations strategically move forward in an integrated fashion to meet their mission. And the organizations that we work with, their mission is to support working artists. So it all flows very nicely for us. And it's been fascinating to see the various states that people are in about this. And I think that's true for everybody's watching that, no matter what industry they're in. But for us, it's been an opportunity more than a scary place.
Well, let's zoom in a little tighter then. Kim, one more question for you. Give us some context. What's it like to work with Native American artists in particular, and how are they unique as a group?
This has been a very interesting endeavor for me because it truly is about community. And when you talk about Indian Market and what it was as a live event, I hear consistently from artists that they're going to miss the opportunity to come together as that community. And this is really, from their perspective, a ceremonial moment for them where, just like when we go to our traditional powwows, we go there not only to dance, but we go there to be in a place where there's community, ceremony, and just this camaraderie around each other in reference to that event. So I think that is no different than Indian Market. This is a community of artists who have some of them have been coming to this event for decades. And then even with the new individuals who were juried in for the first time this year, they were just so excited to be able to be a part of that. And so that's been unique for me, because not only has that translated in communication, but I think that it's translated in helping one another to build websites and to really pivot themselves. And so there's an encouragement in that. There's this real sense of we can do this, and it doesn't matter where you are. You can be a professional who's been doing it for 20 years, and you can be somebody who's coming on brand new, and they just look at each other as equals in that. And I think that that's special.
I lied, Kim. I'm not going to pivot yet. I want to probe that a little bit deeper and get more specific. So you're describing what sounds to me a kind of resilience that, would it be fair to say, is a collective part of the personality of Native American artists, given what they've been through? And the reason I ask you this question is that I think it's amazingly appropriate, perhaps even ironic, but certainly interesting, that we're doing something so cutting edge that hasn't been done before for a group of people that typically have gotten the last leftover stuff at the end and have had to really push to make a name for themselves, not having access to advantages that many working artists do. Am I off base here, or is there something there?
No, I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, working with Native American communities, you're definitely working with a population that's underserved. And I think that that is something that we have recognized, especially in my past experience in working with tribal governments. Those organizational structures are very challenging to even do economic development. And I have to say, this is the first time that I've ever been able to work for an organization who represents Native American tribes, where we're truly in that place of free commerce. And so it allows us to be creative. But the resilience part of this is that it's something that we've been dealing with for generations. And so how do we come out of that miry clay and become something? And so I really appreciate being with an organization where we can empower individuals in doing that, and then as an organization come alongside them to support them in that. And I also feel like it's that one scenario where if you're helping one artist, you're not just helping one artist, you're helping a family. That family is helping a community. And so it really is a ripple effect, as opposed to maybe, other artist organizations where it's very individualized. And so when we look at an artist, we look at an artist in reference to their tribal affiliation and what nation are they representing. And for Swaya and our juried artists, that's 220 nations that we're touching personally. And so for us, it's about resilience, not only for an artist, but it's resilience for that community.
And resources, is it fair to say, Kim? I mean, I think a lot of people take their broadband connections for granted, et cetera, but a lot of Native Americans have trouble, whether it's the geographic location or you talked about being underserved, or it's other factors. They have trouble just getting Wi-Fi access.
Right.
And so we're doing something incredibly powerful at a time when Wi-Fi is still difficult to ensure for everyone in the community. Do you have any thoughts about how that changes?
Yeah, so I mean, even in reference to when you're looking at tribal governments, you don't look at them as a municipality. I mean, they own everything. They own their school systems, their hospitals, they own the economic development on the reservations. And so, in order to have those things, you have to have infrastructure. And part of that infrastructure is being able to have a community that's connected to the internet. And so I feel like even right now you're hearing a lot of talk with regards to federal funding to be pushed out to these Native American tribes because, you know, if we're not connected via internet, literally you're isolated. And so I think that we see that even with the Navajo Nation. They're the largest Native American tribe who's been hit hardest with regards to COVID. And, you know, they're the largest reservation population of artists that we look at from a demographics perspective. And it's been very hard to penetrate that community for lack of internet connectivity. And so I think that even beyond this, after we launch this project, one of the things that we're going to have to take into consideration is maybe going into these communities and creating hubs or some sort of collaboration with the tribal government in order to support artists to bring them online. So there's definitely, what do we do beyond this? Because offering websites is one thing, but not having the connectivity is completely different. And so those things are definite impacts in reference to these Indian communities. And it's making it very difficult for us to reach out to the 1,017 artists who are juried. And so what are the next steps for us as an organization is the question we're asking ourselves currently.
Yeah, I think in this era, if you don't have access to consistent, reliable connectivity, you're essentially a digital diaspora. And now more than ever, you're a diaspora in every way. You can be isolated very quickly. I want to take a moment and address those listeners to the show who are not participating in the Indian market by showing their work virtually and invite you to participate in other ways. Now, first and most obvious is to become a member of Swaya, which you can do for as little as $25 and which nets you a general pass to the virtual market. You can do that at swaya.org. That's SWAIA.org. Just click membership. And second, by experiencing the art business courses designed to help any artist take their business into the 21st century in CHF's digital campus. Visit clarkhelingsfund.org and click campus. There are a couple of different learning options there, and if you've been there before but not lately, check out how it has evolved. Now, I want to pivot and engage you, Eric, because as I understand it, every artist who paid their booth fee for the conference this year got a website on Artspan's platform, your company. And this is an unprecedented leg up in virtualizing marketing and selling for artists. These artists have been receiving training on building out those sites themselves and loading up their online store. You're driving most of that. So my first question is this: on the Artspan website, there's a comment, Eric, about Artspan's role in this project as the hosting environment for participating artists' website. And it says, the art is so beautiful that we don't think it needs to be in just one place temporarily. What did you mean by that? What are you suggesting?
I think what we meant was simply that what you had in the past for the 99 years was one event over, 2 days, correct?
Yes.
And now we will be taking in hopefully in the years to come, that one event as the centerpiece of something much larger, which goes throughout the year. I mean, one of the nice things about websites and a marketplace, a virtual marketplace, is that it doesn't end after 2 days. That simply becomes a very good place to meet possible collectors, to give them your URL, your domain name, and then you meet them again online. and hopefully, they will buy some work.
You're talking about the fact that it's not just artist websites, but that what ArtSpan provides, one of the keys to its sort of genius is a shared collaborative marketplace. So an artist puts items in their e-commerce store, art, crafts, other material and collateral, merchandise, whatever they have. And that stuff actually goes into a shared marketplace where people can search by medium, genre, even in this case, you can search by a Native American tribe, by artist name, and a variety of other criteria.
That's right.
So that it's kind of a suggestion engine. So it seems to me, Eric, you're helping an event like Swaya's free up selling art from merely time and location and the traditional boundaries that are there.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to remember about the websites is that they are all individually branded. So they serve as an individual storefront for the particular artist. But also they're integrated into the marketplace. And people can go directly to the marketplace and find the artist and the work that way. So really, they have two venues to sell their work, the marketplace or their website. And they will have three ways in coming years if we all do this again, and that'll be the actual Santa Fe Festival, and then the marketplace and their individual sites.
Let me throw a couple of questions at you. So one is, how long will these artists' websites, the ones participating in the native market, how long will they be up?
For 1 year.
1 year. Okay. Well, you were fast there.
And obviously, they can extend that at their will. If they want to, they can extend it.
All right. So it's a pretty generous relationship. And then I think you were one of the first, if not the first, website builders to focus specifically on artists and or visual artists. Is that true? And if so, why artists?
Well, I was an artist myself, so I knew something about it, and I knew something about the difficulties of marketing your art and how people were intimidated by it, and the control that third parties had over their lives, critics and galleries and so forth. Whereas with the internet age, they pretty much were in control of their destiny. It was a very empowering thing when it came along.
Well, as head of a technology company, you've probably heard the cliche, everything is going digital, everything is going virtual. And so I don't want our listeners to hear more of that per se as the takeaway from the show. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, as the head of ArtSpan, what shifts you're seeing in the art world since you launched ArtSpan that have put us where we are now, or on the path we are now, to specifically something like this virtual conference in 2020?
Well, really, it started for me 25 years ago when I went out to California to do commissions for one of the founders of Netscape, which was, as you will recall, the first great internet company. And I realized then that, wow, the whole world was going to change. At least that's what I thought. And I set up a website, and it was awful. I didn't get any traffic. It was ugly. I had to pay somebody a lot of money. So that was the genesis of ArtSpan itself. Now I forgot your question.
Well, I'm asking you what you're seeing shifting in the market beyond the mere fact of digital expanding. There must be something beside. You could have created any number of digital things, a chat room for artists, et cetera, but you chose to go this path, and you must have some idea of a shift beyond the mere fact of digital.
Well, it really has to do with not the death of galleries, but certainly the lesser importance of dealers and galleries and so forth. And our artists really have to fend for themselves. And it's not hard. It's a social event, as you say, belonging to a community. And it seemed to me very quickly when I set up my own website, that was great. It was nice to have a website, although it was ugly. But I got zero traffic. So you really have to have a community around you. You can erect your own community nowadays through Facebook and in all sorts of different ways. But I like the idea of the individual combined with the community.
So it sounds like you're really zooming in on a couple of aspects of that. If I were to break it into two buckets, one bucket is removing traditional boundaries, cutting out the middleman, reducing friction between buyer and seller, and creating a more direct relationship. That is inevitably becoming a trend, whether it's the decline of galleries per se, or it's just the opportunities that arise from the second bucket, which is that people now have an unprecedented opportunity to collaborate, band together, form informal or formal cohorts and groups, and to work or sell in tandem or in collaboration, i.e. a community. So I think it strikes me, Eric, that you're kind of addressing both shifts. It's not merely a digital company, it's a company riding the wave of what's happening economically and socially.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not a digital person myself. I'm very real. I'm not a tech, as you know. And this is a way of expanding your universe if you're an artist. It is the only way, really.
That makes me think of you, Steve, because this is a song you've been singing for a long time. And so I want to pivot and ask you a question. One of the most interesting components of the Indian market this year is, of course, NDN World. And that's an immersive, interactive virtual reality space for art collectors, patrons, sponsors, and artists themselves. Think of it like Worlds of Warcraft, except for art and without all the slaying and weapons, right? And Swaya is hosting multiple events and exhibits in that virtual space for which Vercadia is responsible. I'd like to hear more about that. So I want to ask you this. Can you start by telling us what is Vercadia and how is it being used in the context of the Swaya Indian market?
So Vercadia is an open source virtual reality enabled social platform. We call it social VR. Now, just because it's VR doesn't mean you have to wear the VR headset. It works in desktop mode. So the people who maintain that community are very interested in the same themes that we've been talking about here, which is first and foremost community. Creating a shared experience that is not limited by physical distance or limitations that we experience in the real world, which is some forms of prejudice or you don't really fit in and this and that. So it's really the next step in developing communities together. So the second aspect of it is that it is truly open source, which means anyone can download the software, put up their own world and host a community, or they can just be a participant and join.
Let me ask you a couple of follow-up questions, and you know my penchant for being a bit interrogative here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate and do a couple of yeah buts because I'm riding Eric's wave here, and Eric is talking about community and websites are something I understand, and a shared place to sell my art. That I can get my head around. But what you're talking about, it seems hard. It seems fraught with challenges. It seems maybe easier to just use video. So take that challenge and tell us why even do a virtual space, a VR space at all with Swaya and the market.
So, and this is the sort of question and commentary we get back. It was a bit of the Swaya team's reaction when we were presenting this idea to them. And we knew we couldn't say, well, you kind of have to experience it to understand. We knew that was not a reasonable answer. But for those of us who work in the space and work on the platform, all of our meetings are in the space. We don't use Zoom or anything else. And we do feel like we're really together. And our project team is from all over the world. Germany, Netherlands, Spain, UK, Ukraine, Taiwan, and several places in the US. Many of us have never met, but we for sure have a sense of community, camaraderie, and connectedness that I have never felt on Zoom calls. Zoom calls are very good and very fun, but there's something different about experiencing it in 3D space.
Okay, so you've answered the question I was going to go to next, which is what kinds of connections are possible that maybe can't be accomplished through simpler digital interfaces like Zoom. We're in a Zoom call right now, obviously.
Right.
And we may just do this in the virtual world at some point if we're lucky. But how close does being in this VR environment that you're describing, how close does it get to an actual hands-on physical experience, or is the goal even to replicate that, approximate it, or maybe even exceed what is possible in a hands-on experience?
Well, Well, first of all, this is as good as it gets in the current state of the technology. So how close it gets, this is it. This is a sort of a perspective thing. Every person experiences it a little differently, just like we all experience the world a little differently. But there is very much a common theme for those who keep coming back, in that it is very close to the emotional connection we feel. For example, we tend to apologize sometimes unnecessarily for stepping in front of someone when you are between the speaker and the circular audience. If it's a small group, if we happen to step in, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to step in front. There are those sorts of personal space type, not really issues, but events that happen in world. And so that's a cue that says, ooh, this is a lot more than Zoom. There's another effect, and it's very much an emotional. It's part of our being, okay, a part of our being that we have in the real world, and it's part of our existence in virtual reality. There's an effect for new people. It certainly happened to me, and I was Kim. I was talking with a person from the marketing team who was giving me her reaction, and this effect is, I feel like I'm not wearing what I would normally wear. And my first experience, there was all kinds of people who had been there for years. It was my first time in, and I felt like I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt to a gala ball or to a corporate meeting, and I just felt out of place. I'm not going to out her, Kim, but she was saying to me, I don't mean to sound so vain, but can I get something else to wear? And, you know, she was kind of apologetic about it, but I loved it, because what that told me is she's feeling that emotional connection, that presence in the community in world. And so I gave her a complete free pass, as we always do. Don't worry about it. That's really good news. And, you know, tried to talk her through what her options were, and, you know, also some of the costs for custom avatars and, and things like that. You started talking about picking out suits, you know, at the tailor. Anyway, so that's the level. Where it is going is very much as you say. Right now, if we shift from talking about desktop, the experience in desktop, which most of us in Indian world are doing, but if you happen to have a VR headset, in the Vercadia community, you very much can find conversations where people are talking about, instead of hand tracking, let's talk about finger tracking. And can we also now start tracking leg movement? Because once that starts to happen, and the issue is tracking many, many more data points and a lot more processing. But once you can do that, the applications really start to go up in terms of acting, in terms of choreography, in terms of physical therapy virtually. It's
native dance.
Yes, yes. So
fashion shows.
yeah. So that is for sure the roadmap. But even currently, those of us who go in and experience it and stay in, it's that connectedness and community that is already very true and consistent with the real world.
Well, let me ask you this. You know, I have a couple of follow-up questions for you, but I want to redirect back to Elizabeth and Kim, because you're giving us kind of the developer founder perspective and the technical perspective, but Elizabeth and Kim had the foresight, the vision to look at this thing, which in an alpha stage, and go, yes, yes to an experiment, yes to something that is not so polished. It is a full-on, you know, consumer-ready experience. Yes to something experimental that we know it's good, we know it works, but we don't know everything we're going to use it for yet. We're going to invent all of that. So Elizabeth and Kim, why would you do this?
I'm going to make one comment, and then I'm going to let Kim talk about it, because it's really her baby. But I see this as the beginning of the holodeck, right? I mean, we all now wear the Star Trek communicator on our wrist or carry them around. This is a holodeck, right? And the thing that excites me about it is the intersection of art and tech, because it's artists who are making those outfits. It's artists who are going to be doing the dances. It's artists who have constructed the whole thing and put their aesthetics. And when we talk about community, my goal and underlying reason for creating CHF and continuing to work on all of this is to have artists and inventors and creators be at the center of community activity and development, because that's when we move forward as a species, and that's how we support our planet, and that's what turns us all on. To Steve's point, that the marketing woman wants to wear what she wants to wear. So we're in an age of personal expression, and what this does is bring our aesthetic sensibilities and our interest in expressing it with an artist capability and sensibility at the core and at the beginning of it, as opposed to being appended on at the end, which we all know is hollow, and yet we see it all the time. So that's the thing that is the most exciting to me about it. But Kim, it's your baby. So
yeah, so I think that for me, it was a scenario where it really was from a marketing standpoint. I feel that we as an organization are in a place where we really have to take into consideration generational transfers that are occurring. And so when you look at the demographics regarding our collectors, they're 65 years and older. And so what are we going to do in the future? And this really went back to my interview with the board, because one of their questions to me specifically is, what are you going to do to take us into the next 100 years? And so, when I was in North Carolina, I was there with my children and with my grandchildren. And, I'm just watching them interact in this world called Fortnite. And so I have a 6-year-old playing a game with a 26-year-old, and they're communicating with each other. And it was their way of socializing with each other in a space where they had a goal. And so they worked together. It was community. And so I was just, even before coming on to Swaya, asking questions of my kids, saying, who are you playing with? And because she's talking and I'm wanting her attention. And she's like, can we talk after this game? So when I actually got the proposal from Steve regarding what this in-world was, there was a statistic that he had given me that said, Fortnite has only been in existence for 3 years, and they have 250 million followers. And I had an aha moment. Like this platform has given me the opportunity to capture a generation that we're not currently capturing, but it also allows us as an organization to do some very creative work. And I think it goes back to what Elizabeth is saying, is that we can commission artists to help us with developing avatars. We can use it as a cross-cultural reference and really share with the world about who are these Native Americans? Do they really live in teepees? Do they really exist? And so, we get to have an opportunity to not only bring this platform as a way to educate globally who we are as a people group, and be able to use it to promote art. And so to me, that art is multimedia. And so it can be 2D, it can be 3D, it can be a fashion show, a runway, and avatars, it could be a museum, it could be so many things. And so I just saw it as an opportunity for us as an organization to be able to use something where we can go in, have that sense of community, communicate with people, and be able to share who we are. And also there was one other reason that I loved it, and it was this, is that I think that even in reference to a previous question that you gave me regarding the pandemic, and was there any thought regarding going physically again? And I just think that, here we all are in August, and we've been in this thing for 6 months. Do we see it going away in the near future? No. And so having said that, this is also another way for us to come alongside other art markets, help other artists. I mean, it just allows us to be creative in so many ways. And so it had so many layers to it for me personally, where I got excited about it for sure. And it's definitely a challenge. I mean, I'm not going to lie. This is cutting edge technology. This is a scenario where you have to have partners in this who are patient with each other, are patient with the people who are trying to get in and understand. And I feel that as we move past Indian market, it's still going to be a platform that we're going to use in the future. And it's going to be one that we're all going to learn together.
Well, let me stay with you a minute, Kim. I sort of stole it away from Steve, but I'm glad we're zeroing in on this a little bit. And I'm going to come back around to Eric and Steve in a minute. But I want to stay on this topic of the virtual 3D world and Vercadia. First, I want to say that I love that your analogy about Fortnite, because kids do say this all the time. They try to tell their parents, Mom, Dad, you don't understand. There are things we do in world. We build relationships. And I see a lot of parents kind of laugh about that over drinks, shrug it off, go, yeah, they build relationships. But they're describing something real, something that has a level of depth that goes beyond email and cell phone texting even, and certainly motivates a lot of people to build an entire online life, set of personas and community. So you actually took that seriously when your kids talk to you about it. And I think that's nothing short of profound. I'm happy about that. But to stay on with you on this, Kim, in the virtual world, you're actually reproducing some of the experience that's central to the native market: costumes, Native American clothing, native and non-native avatars. In conjunction with Steve, you guys are doing the work to design and produce that stuff. And I think some of the native digital artists are actually contributing some of those elements: Chad Yellow, John Little Coyote. But specifically, Kim, to out you a little bit, your avatar in the virtual world is looking great. Could you describe some of the process of having that built?
Well, so when I was made the decision that, well, no, I was actually in the conceptual side of this. And one of the things that I was wanting from Steve was, okay, so if I call up a friend and have him develop a regalia for me. And so Chad was an artist that I have been in the powwow circle with since he was a little boy. He was dancing with my kids. And so I called up Chad and asked him if he would develop an avatar for me. And so I thought initially, oh, put me in a traditional dress. And, he was just so cute because he goes, I don't see you in a traditional dress. Is it okay if I put you in a jingle dress? And I said, yes. And so when I saw the drawings of what this avatar was going to look like, and so the drawing was a front version, a side version, and a back version, full version of me in a jingle dress outfit. Do you know that really threw me back to when I was in the circle at powwows with my kids and my friends and my family abroad. And so it was not only touching to me, but it was profound to me, because now when I go into Indian world, I'm actually in my traditional regalia. And, jingle dresses represent for our people a form of intercession even, and prayer. And so, I've just felt like this has been a journey of intercession and prayer for me, not only for Swaya, but for artists and for the world. And so I feel like this is a scenario where not only do we get to share who we are as a people group, but really, what our traditions are and what they mean to us. And so the whole process, and I got to give this conceptual to my board, and they were astounded and excited about it. And so I think this is about a vision, and people are starting to catch it, and I love that.
Well, it was right to steal it away from Steve and pivot to you, but I'm going to pivot back. I have exactly 3 more questions about Vercadia, and I sense also the need to give Steve a moment to comment at the end of this segment to finish up before I zoom back out. So I need to ask these questions because it's the job of a host to channel the audience, and they will hang a podcast host if he doesn't get answers to them immediately about the following things, now that we've had that discussion. So here are the questions, and whoever knows this information among the team can answer. Number 1, where is this Vercadia environment at the Swaya market, this NDN world, and how can I get in there to participate?
Yeah, all right. I'm going to give you short answers because there is a backstory to the jingle dress that must be told, and Kim doesn't even know it.
Oh, good.
So I will indulge the host. All right, so anyone can actually download this at Vercadia.com. There's a client software, we call it, an app you can install on Windows, Mac, and Linux. And there are a variety of worlds that you can go into, and there's a little pop-up panel. It's almost like using a browser, only this is different software. And you can go to different locations, and NDN, those letters, NDN space world are one of them. The only difference is you do need a membership from Swaya, which they would gladly welcome during this month of virtual Indian market. And you can get into Indian worlds once you have a membership from their site.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, I used to play EverQuest. I'm not much of a gamer, but when you log in and you've got your character, you can enter any number of servers and worlds.
Correct.
And I found the Vercadia experience to be very much like that. And I went exploring. I dropped into a couple of worlds that were off the beaten path and had a little fun in there. So it is that.
Cool. Yes, very much so.
All right. So question number 2, and thank you for indulging. I promise I'll come back to you for the jingle dress story. Question number 2, is there art on the walls, and how do we buy it if it's there or that we can see it?
There is art on the walls, and there is a pop-up button open here, or click here. What it does is it pops open the Swaya website for this year's entries for that piece of art only. And from that, and also some of the information in world, you can find the artist. You certainly tipped your hand about the future of this, which is we do want it to be possible to just buy right there.
Well, this is coming, and certainly there is art available every day on the Swaya website, both in its ongoing auctions, but also from the ArtSpan Swaya marketplace, which is prominently featured at the top of the Swaya website. So if you go to swaya.org and click through to the market, you'll see it. Please go there and experience some of what Eric is talking about a shared market, especially if you're an artist, but also if you want to obtain some of this art, which is selling really, really fast before it's gone, and be able to say you did. I want to ask the third question then, which is there are some real-time or several real-time events in Vercadia's NDN world as part of the market this year. Could someone elaborate on what events are we talking about? What's there that I could participate in besides sort of being in the world, walking around on my own time freely?
Sure. Already right now, there is an exhibit of all of the work submitted to be juried that you can walk in and experience, and there's a panel next to each work that describes about it and who did it and everything. And that is up until tomorrow. And then on the 13th, which is tomorrow, we will be rearranging a little bit, thank you to Vercadia, or at least we have the preview of the final pieces. And that is a private VIP experience, and it's also the official opening of the space. So there will be an invocation. So that's our first official event. And then on the 15th is the award ceremony. So of those finalist pieces, we will be announcing who gets best in category, who gets best in show, etc. We already have judging. The judges have recorded why they liked the pieces, because of course they already know who won. We just haven't announced it yet. So that will be happening in World. There will be, well, I don't know, Steve, where we ended up with the end of the month, if we're going to try to do some kind of avatar catwalk or not. There's still talk
I assure you there's, of course, Kim and yourself get to kind of have the final say, but we are for sure going to be persuading you to do a few things like that. Just to give you a little hint, as you know, I've been helping out with the workshops with some of the artists, how do I get in and this and that. Every artist I talk to says, hey, how can we get in here? How can we do more? And so absolutely we need to cook up a few things, sort of almost like an after party. So, and our crew at Vercadia are pretty good at after parties, so stay tuned.
They are. I've been to their daily movie screenings, which are kind of a hoot for those who want to go exploring. But I find that this is, as Elizabeth said at the start of our conversation, the nexus of technology and art. You give an artist a new toolkit with new paints and new colors and new fabrics and building blocks, whether they're polygons or paintbrushes, and they're going to say, what else can you let me do with this? What rules can I break? So I love the fact that this is kind of an open space. And what I'm hearing emphasized now is we can kind of do whatever we want. If we want to get in there and have a meetup, we want to get in there and have a panel discussion, we want to get in there and show a movie or get in there and do a catwalk, we can totally do it. So Steve, I want to, before I pivot back to the larger group and some of our final questions wrapping up the show, I want to ask you for the jingle dress story. So what do we not know about Kim Pion's experience?
Yeah, and what you were saying about that marriage of technology and art, I have to give credit to Elizabeth, because she, no doubt, she has never told me what she was thinking, but we were not doing well when we were presenting to Kim and the Swaya team in the first, I would say, 45 minutes or so. And it was pretty much dying. And we had stepped into this discussion about community, and that's where Kim started hearing, instead of this thing about, are you gamers or what, Kim started hearing community, and she told that story about Fortnite. And then we started talking about identity and representation in world. And one of the things that our team was kind of sweating out is, well, we don't know how to make a Native American avatar, but it's one of those things where, okay, just put it aside, don't worry about it. Let's just talk to Swaya and see what happens. So Elizabeth, once the conversation starting to go, Elizabeth kind of pops off with, but Kim, why can't you get some Native American artists to work with the Vercadia team? And it was sort of like supernova explosion, boom. And we're like, ooh. And then I forget how the conversation went, but as we were wrapping up near the end, Kim says, you know, I really would like to see what I look like in Native American regalia from my community. And then we wrap up the call. Right afterwards, debrief. We've so got to do this, whether the project is on or not. We've got to do this. But we, you know, we wanted to be cool about it and not circle back, you know, within 10 minutes after the call. So we let it lay. But it was just absolutely on. And then further to Elizabeth's point, Kim put us in touch with Chad Yellowjohn, and great experience. What am I, you know, a little confusion. Okay, what am I doing and what do you need? But he got it. And then he provided perfect reference artwork. He worked with our artist, who is also just a great intuitive sense of 3D space and color and placement and all kinds of things. So they worked together to create the jingle dress. And I saw the screenshot of it and was like, ooh, that's really amazing. And I got to tell you, so Kim comes in, and the artist who made it from Chad Yellowjohn's reference work gave her the link, and she puts it on. And I got to tell you, it was like one of those movie moments when somebody, either whether it's a man or a woman, they walk out and they go from, you know, a person into, oh my. And I got chills. It was, oh. And so, Kim, your story about how you felt, you know, we had a similar reaction. Wow. So thank you for that.
All right, so I'm going to pivot now. Thank you for that, Steve, and kind of go into the final segment of the show and ask some more general questions of the audience, of you guys rather, for the audience. So, you know, it's people may be listening to this show a year from now, but if they're listening right now in August 2020, it's almost too obvious to mention now that we're in a new normal, that the pandemic has pushed a transition to virtual in general. So the first question is, how do you see artists ultimately benefiting from a pivot to leveraging online channels to sell, network, create their own relationships with collectors? And anybody can take that question.
Well, I would start by saying the majority of Swaya artists historically have earned a substantial amount of their income every year during Indian market. And that was one of the reasons that we were so adamant that we have to do something, because we can't just have an economic catastrophe fall on the heels of a medical one. But the goal is to make it so that these artists and many other artists can earn a living year round. So that's where the ArtSpan piece really comes into play, is you have to be able to engage in e-commerce and understand what you bring to it, So who are you as an artist? What are you trying to accomplish? What is your message? What is your story? What is your brand story? What are your sales strategies? And how are you going to use e-commerce and an individual website that belongs to you is really key to delivering all of that. So that, I think, is the biggest piece of it all, is, again, to put the artist at the center of it and give them the tools and the opportunity to earn a living so they can continue making art, which we all benefit from.
Well, not to put too fine a point on it, but you emphasized individual websites. That makes me want to turn immediately to Eric. Just because this show is a form of business education for artists delivered in podcast format, and ask a question I think a lot of artists have asked us before and have on their mind, which is, Eric, do you agree that each artist should have their own individual website? Obviously, I'm asking somebody that does this for a living, but why not then? I'm playing devil's advocate like I did with Steve. Why not just sell your work on Etsy, even if you're going to do it online, or eBay or some other marketplace like that, and not bother? Is there a reason?
Yeah, there's several reasons. One is branding. I mean, you really need to brand your own website, and you need to control the look of it. You need to frame your work as you feel it ought to be framed, rather than as Etsy feels it ought to be framed. There are just innumerable ways that it comes back to you in a positive way. It also looks better for your buyers. I mean, Etsy is fine. I mean, but it's a DIY site, and I think artists can go a little bit beyond that, and in many cases, way beyond that. So.
Okay, so we're talking about not just a shift to selling online, but a shift in the burden of needing to do the work of distinguishing yourself as an artist, of branding yourself effectively as part of what we're seeing in this trend, and part of what we're at the forefront of in doing this event. So it behooves me to ask the following question. I don't know who to direct this to, so please, whoever can take this, do it. But we're dying to know this. The producer, I have to give credit to Penelope, our producer, for this one. Do you think the virtual environment changes which demographic of collectors is interested in buying the artist's work?
I think it expands it.
I think it makes it a little younger.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I've seen innumerable studies that, for example, there's some galleries out on the West Coast that have done the majority of their sales through the internet. And they obviously have physical spaces, and people go to them, and they go to them for openings and this, that, and the other. But really, where they do most of their sales is over the web. And one of the things that I want to just mention briefly, and that is that obviously this is not a one-time event. I mean, the festival may be a 1 month festival, but really I'm looking towards the holiday season. And I think we should all get together and figure out how we're going to promote these artists and their work, and how they're going to promote themselves too, because this is supposed to be an empowering thing. So why not? There, I've said my piece.
No, I think that's key, Eric. I appreciated that. The point is, I think Etsy is today's gallery, right? There's nothing wrong with it. You should be on it. You should be everywhere, right?
Yep.
You should partner with people. You should build relationships. You should still have a gallerist. You want people to help promote you. You want them to put you in group shows. You want to do all of those things. But I think it's a fallacy that the artist ever could get away without a personal brand. That was one way that artists were taken advantage of and stigmatized, is you're not allowed to self-promote. You shouldn't do that. You should just make your art and then let other people sell it. Selling is a dirty word. Somebody else has to do that for you.
And the best of all possible worlds is the two wedded.
It has to be together, because it's just that having your own website is one example of how you put out your own message and your own brand, and the message has to go with the work that you create. So of course you should be represented everywhere, but it has to start with you, who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and how you accomplish that. And that is what we're trying to teach, and that is what having your own website, it's like you used to have a business card, and now you've got a lot more than that. And yes, you can. And that we say that all day long. Yes, you can, and yes, you must.
Well, this is interesting. It's my back door into kind of the wind-up topic of the show, which is virtualized education focused on business training, entrepreneurship, the essential skill sets like branding, like selling, like marketing to a certain audience. So I find it interesting. I heard you say, Eric, that you think that age group will become a bit younger among collectors. I think some artists will think that limits them. They're not going to reach the usual age group they've been reaching if that age group is, say, over 40. Others will see it as, hey, here's a whole new market, an opportunity I'm not currently reaching, and a way to tackle it. But I want to point out that when I look at who's participating in the virtual market this year, we've got good demographic data that says that the largest bucket of, and more than half of the people participating in the Swaya virtual market are 55 or older. As many are 55 to 64 as are 65 and over. They divide neatly into half and half, but together they constitute about half of the market per se. So are we not at the same time that we're teaching artists to distinguish themselves and potentially reach new markets, are we also not teaching a whole new cohort of collectors to interact with artists in a new way?
Well, I think it's been growing for quite a while. Certainly the last 20 years, the internet has been central to our lives, old or young. I think it's more difficult for older people, or it was more difficult for older people to envision a world where they would actually buy art online. But now it's second nature. And certainly tools like our AR feature make it so easy to envision or to actually see, to preview the artwork in their homes. There's no barrier, I think, to going ahead, as long as they have that comfort zone where they're dealing with a reputable organization and the artists are under your roof. Talking to you, Kim.
Yes.
All right. So we've got just about 5 more minutes before we need to wrap up. And I have a total of 3 more questions before we call it a day. It's been a good long episode. I wanted to give us extra time here because I think that when you bring 5 people together to talk about an event like this, you've got to go into an extra inning. So I imagine I've worn you guys out. But here are my 3 questions. First, Steve, I would be remiss, knowing privately that this is an interest of yours, if I didn't ask you on this show about this while we have you. You were on an earlier podcast episode, and I recommend our listeners go back and find that in our archives about selling art, and I thought it was spectacular. But the question we didn't talk about then, or that I'd like to ask you about now, is we talk about teaching artists business. We talk about art, to quote Elizabeth Hewling, art is a business and artists should run it. Which is now CHF's tagline. But you also see business as art, and not merely in some light-hearted way, but you're always advocating, in my experience, for bringing the emotional sector back into the workplace, for bringing creativity into the way we do entrepreneurship, the way we conceive of and run our own businesses. You almost liken sometimes a business that is fun to run and worth running as building a rock band, being a member of Fleetwood Mac. So you think in those terms, games, movies, rock music. Can you tell us a little bit about, am I accurate in what I'm expressing, but can you put it in better words and tell us a little bit about why you think that way?
You're accurate, and you're putting it in better words, because with this and, Barstool, I could go on quite a lot. So yeah. Business is no longer a rational endeavor. It's a creative performance. I had a traditional business education from the 20th century, and it was all about data and rational decision making, probably the worst advice I ever got. And it was pounded into me in ranks and ranks of business management trainees. And that is not why we do what we do. It is not why we buy things. It is not why we choose to live where we live. It's not why we buy from a particular artist. We buy because there's something that they're communicating that is shared in us. Oh, that person gets me, whether we're talking about a musician or sculpture, painter, whatever medium. And so when we end up talking with that person directly, I'm digressing a little bit, talking about the in-world experience, but we have even more of a connection. Oh, now I really want to buy from this person. I love the story they told. So, but you asked, why is this my perspective? And when we have businesses insisting that it's not personal, it's just business, we're denying a whole, most of our humanity we're denying when we make that statement. And when we say you really need to fit in here in order to keep your job, we're denying self, we're denying identity, whether we're talking about gender or race, or I'm just a nerd who wants to fly my flag, all of that. Many of us come from a world where that is denied. And so I do think we are now crossing the threshold into a world where, no, we want to buy business as a performance art. And I'll give you an example. So hybrid cars and electric cars were pretty much ho-hum. So how are we going to change the planet? Well, Tesla comes along and says, oh, yeah, that doesn't really do it. Let me put this in a really racy dress. And oh yeah, the Tesla Roadster, let's talk electric cars. And so that's the deal with all kinds of businesses. It's not enough to just be rational. We want our whole existence. And so, yeah, that's the basis of my perspective.
Well, I asked that question because, again, we rarely get you on the show. And the premise of the Thriving Artist podcast, which has the word thriving in the name for a reason, it's all about helping working artists thrive, is that art is a business and artists should run it. And one of the big pushbacks we get from traditional sectors of thinking and across the art industry, sometimes artists, definitely in some of the gallery areas where there's a financial interest in believing a certain thing sometimes, and even from nonprofits that say they serve artists, is that art and business are like oil and water. They don't belong together. Business is a necessary evil, and artists really should stay as far away from business as we can. But listening to you, you are actually making the case for me, and this is the reason I did a roundabout instead of asking you the question directly, is you're making the case that business is not only not foreign to the creative professional or the visual artist, not alien to them, but business as creative performance is the artist's normal domain. Looked at in the traditional way, it's just business, it's just moving widgets, we're just the Rockefellers here. Yeah, of course that stuff feels alien. It's alien to the rest of us too, who have to wear the right kind of clothes to get promoted. But business looked at, to quote you, and you've said this many times, that's a Steve Pernod quote, business is a creative performance. Looked at it that way, it is more proper to the artist, to the creative professional, to be in business than almost anybody else. It's their natural domain. So I love that you said that. And with that, I want to go to Elizabeth Hewlings for the second to the last question, and zoom out even farther, because you run into this when trying to work with other organizations, corporations who have a social mission, people that understand what's in it for them, some part of what we're trying to do, but face challenges in seeing the vision or the cause that CHF is putting out here. So if what we're doing with Swaya, if the five of us here, if Eric, Steve, Kim, and your collaboration is a prime example of what it looks like when multiple sectors work together to adapt quickly, to help artists, what else might be possible going forward? And can this problem-solving collaborative model be applied to a wider variety of challenges and crises?
Well, it's the only way we ever get anything done as a species, you know. I mean, when we were in caves, somebody came up with a new idea to hone a stick to be sharper, and then went and was successful hunting, came home, told the story around the campfire, and then drew a picture of it so that other people could then replicate it. So, I mean, that's just how we work, right? If it doesn't start with vision and innovation, and you don't know why the heck you're doing something, or you're doing something because you're going to make a bunch of money quick, that's, yeah, maybe you'll make a bunch of money quick, but you're going to end up with something that doesn't really serve anybody else in the long term. And right now, we're in a moment, I mean, you mentioned Tesla, Steve, but we're in a moment where we have got to change the way we do a lot of things in order to not just make sure Swaya is here for another 100 years, but make sure that any of us is here for another 100 years. And the way to do that is by involving the artists, entrepreneurs, visionaries, innovators at the beginning of the process. So I mean, you're right, Daniel, I've seen it over and over again. Working at Citibank, working with the chiropractor down the street, working with Human Rights Watch, working with every arts organization I've been involved in, that you have to back up and say, what are we trying to do anyway? What is our strategy? And therefore, how are we going to accomplish it? And that is a creative exercise. And people become afraid of that because they are taught not to marry the two. And with many of our artists, we have to break them out of that and say, you're giving a proposal to a corporation to be the artist who gets to supply the art for their campus, or I don't know what. And we get a proposal that's really ugly and has no color in it, and it's just boring. And then they append to that all of the art that they've made. And it's just so hard to say, you're allowed to bring all of your creativity to that business proposal, because why not bring your creativity to everything that you do? And artists actually do have an innate advantage there if we can allow it out. Everybody is creative. Everything that you do in life is creative. And if it's not, stop doing it. Go do something else or find another way to do it that is creative. I see it in every walk of life.
Excellent point. I'm going to finish up with the following question. And this is for all of you, any of you, whoever would like to take a stab to add something, correct somebody on this or whatever. Beyond this year's market in August 2020, what are the midterm and the long-term goals or anticipations for collaboration between the organizations that are represented here today by the four of you?
Well, I think it's, and I'll speak to just some initial things. I mean, like, you know, we are definitely entertaining conversations with organizations who are unable to pivot at this time. But even more so than that, I think that, you know, Eric said, well, what about Christmas? Let's do something for Christmas. And I'm like, no, we're going to do something for September, you know? And so one of my thoughts for September is doing a live cookbook where we feature Native American chefs and talk about our indigenous foods. And, you know, food is a form of art. It's not one that we've probably ever talked about at Swaya. But now that we're virtual, we can get very creative in whatever that theme is for the month. And so I think that for us, we want to stay online. We want to continue to work very closely with every partner on this podcast. And how do we get creative to help other organizations, help artists abroad, and then let's develop programming that keeps us connected and drives people to our website so that we can drive people to the artists' websites. And so, you know, we're talking about artists and we're talking about their economic development and their business development. And I think that simultaneously, Swaya is thinking about its economic development and its business development. So as we go through that journey together, it's marketing together, it's branding together, it's being creative. And I just love the conversation that you guys are having regarding that everything that we do in this world, whether it's a business person, accountant, you know, I was an accountant and I considered that an art. And so I love the fact that what I did in that profession really did prepare me for what I'm doing today in reference to marketing and getting creative.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Well, I have all kinds of ideas for how I want to work with all of the people on this call.
I would like
Total
to
world
see us,
domination. Yeah.
I'd like to see us grow and grow in different ways, and in ways that we really don't know that we're going to grow in. I
Right.
think the VR way is one of those ways, and there will be others. I mean, we don't really know what this could look like in 5 years.
Right.
And that's an exciting thing to really contemplate.
So it sounds like, Eric, to take some earlier advice from you or earlier vision, it's important to keep the relationship. We don't know what we're going to be building or how we're going to be collaborating. We just know that we will be and that we are. And the community that you emphasized earlier, we're forming that here. Would you say that's right?
Well, I'd say that we're one element of the community, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Steve, any thoughts?
I'll leave you with two. So first of all, as you know, professionally, I'm very much interested in the future of work and how are we as humanity evolving, even if we think we're not evolving. And very much so, we're evolving out of humans as a component of production, whether it's service production or whether it's manufacturing production. And so what does that leave? That leaves humans for maintaining productive processes and, more importantly, designing the output of those processes and then designing the processes themselves. Two very important design components. And so, Elizabeth, you were talking about this. The future of humanity is creativity, design, imagination, and that is all swinging back toward people who have, I don't know if it's literally sidelined, but we talk about artists not being given full credit, maybe in the 20th century and prior centuries, where now it is all about design. What does Apple say? Apple does not say manufactured in China. It says designed in California. And that is their signature, right? So that's number one, is that I very much believe it's swinging back to the artist community. And Kim, I think this is Swaya's time this century for Native American artists. The other thing is, we were talking about this, what happens, and I'll bring it down to just what's happening with the Vercadia platform. So we had some really unexpected experiences. In retrospect, we should have known. But when we were paired up by Kim with various artists to work on avatars, the little micro explosions that were going off and the potential and, oh, how can we do more of this? And this is great, I get it. And people were getting the ideas really fast. And the thing that causes innovation is these unexpected reactions when you're hanging out together talking. And this is, when you look back in history, the way certain parallel inventions happened, it's because they were in each other's orbit. They were influencing each other. We see this in music. People start reverbing back and forth. Now that we can no longer have distance separating us, I predict that this is going to accelerate some really interesting creative explosions. And I don't know, I leave it at that. I don't know what it's going to be about, but I believe it's going to happen because it sure happened with us.
You've been listening to the Thriving Artist Podcast, an educational feature of the Clark Hillings Fund for Visual Artists. If you've enjoyed this program, please be sure to subscribe to new episodes and review your experience on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you tune in. To participate in the virtual Indian market, go to swaya.org, that's SWAIA.org. To purchase some amazing art and support this incredible event, go to artspan.com/Swaya. And to get early access to the virtual World Vercadia, where you'll find Steve Pernod tending the virtual bar more often than not, visit vercadia.com. That's VIRCADIA.com. And of course, we've already mentioned CHF's digital campus. This show depends on support from listeners like you. Consider giving to keep this show broadcasting and bringing you events and guests like these. Click Give at our website, clarkhealingsfund.org. And for those desiring to sponsor an episode, you can do that at clarkhealingsfund.org/go/sponsor. Thank you for listening. And thank you, Kim, Eric, Elizabeth, and Steve. It's been really great having you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Two